Thanks very much for coming, and it's great to see that pretty much everybody showed up. I hope you're going to find this interesting, because I do. And those of you who know me already know that I can hardly shut up when I get on the subject, so I hope this makes some sense. So we're just going to jump straight into it, and then probably pretty much at the end I'll open more up to questions, okay? Because I think a lot of your questions are going to be answered along the way. First of all, I just want to agree on that when we talk about we want to lose weight, we want to lose body fat. Will that be a fair statement? Yeah? Okay. So I want to tell you about RQ. It's a respiratory potent, and it's what I had a test done. I was in Florida last year, actually in 2013, and this is a VO2 max test, and the respiratory quotient is what they measure through this mask, and they can measure exactly what you're burning, whether you're burning up your sugar stores or your fat stores. When I stood on that treadmill getting ready for this test, I put the mask on, hooked up to the computer, and they go to me, holy hell, you're burning 100% fat. They had never seen that before. So how this works is that, doesn't matter you can't see this, but with the VO2 max test, it's basically a stress test. You go you go as long as you can, and when you quit, that's when you can't go anymore. And so what they want to measure is how much fat to sugar you burn along the way. So as basically what happens, this curve means is that the yellow here represents if you're burning 100% fat, then you're what's 0.7, okay, or 70% carbon dioxide comes out in your breath. That's what they can measure. When you 70% oxygen, 30% carbon dioxide. As your effort level increases, you start to burn more and more sugar. That's the blue bit. Okay, so when you go in full pelt, pretty much everybody, no matter how trained you are, you're going to be very close to 100%. So you hear about some really well-trained athletes, they can sustain this high fat burning for a long time. But the point I want to make to you is that, as you can see, the more effort you put on yourself in the form of exercise, the less fat you burn. That's what I want you to remember. And that doesn't, this curve is pretty much the same for all of us. It just depends on how good you are. Okay? So just remember that, the more effort you put in, the harder you go, the more sugar and the less fat you're going to burn. Okay, so how do we get that? It's not really a question, you don't have to answer, but this is basically what we get told and what we think, isn't it? We eat too much, move too little. Yeah? Makes sense. So in other words, there's more energy coming in than there is going out. That's true, because you can't make something out of nothing. But let's take this little story. Let's say this room was Tony's restaurant. Okay? This is the whole restaurant. So we have one door for coming in, and we have one door over there for going out. So let's say people keep coming in, and people keep coming out, you know, when they're finished. But one night, it just gets more and more crowded in here. Nobody's leaving. And so, let's say I was standing out there and somebody comes along and they go to me, why is Tony's restaurant so crowded? I said, look, there's more people that came in than went out. Now if I said that to you, would you look at me and go, well, of course, but why? I said, look, it's very simple. Not as many people left as came in. And you look at me, are you just, that's just a statement, it's not an explanation. What's the problem? Let's say this is the only door you can come in, but that was the door you could go out. Now that door is jamming. So people are coming in, but they can't get out. You get the picture? So the problem is, the out door is broken. Come in, but we can't get out. And that is the way it works with how we get fat. It's not so much that we accumulate fat tissue, or we accumulate, let's just call it energy for now in fat tissue. It's that we can't get rid of it again. We can't use it. We're meant to have fat tissue. We can't live without it. But if you think of it this way, it's meant to be a wallet. Okay, when your wallet is empty, you go to the ATM, put in your card, get some money out, top it up. Then you spend that. Okay? So the same analogy, that is how your fat tissue is supposed to work. No one can live with 0% body fat. We can't. And we'll get to that later, why it's so essential. But what ends up happening, it now becomes a vault. See the difference? So we're going to go, well, we don't want that. We want it to be a wallet. We want it to temporarily store energy, and then we use it again. And it's the reason you can sleep through the night. If you didn't have fat tissue, or the mechanism, you would wake up and have to eat every few hours. So as you eat at night, food goes into your system, some of it goes to fat storage. Then when you go to sleep and sleep for 8 hours, might be 10 hours before you eat again, that's when energy starts coming out of your fat stores. Any questions so far? Okay. So how do you actually accumulate fat? How does that happen? And there's one major player, and that's insulin. Most of you would have heard of it. Anybody's diabetic, you would have heard of insulin. Insulin regulates your blood sugar. And there are other hormones that do with accumulating fat, but this is the major player. Okay? So when you eat, especially carbohydrates, your sugar goes up, it gets converted to sugar inside your body, and you can only have so much sugar in your bloodstream at any one time. So insulin is released, and that lowers your blood sugar. But where does it put it? It puts it into, obviously, your organs and muscles are going to use for energy what they can. Your muscles are going to store some, very little. Your liver is going to store some. But if the sugar load's too big, the rest is going to get converted to fat and put into your fat tissue for temporary storage. But what happens is that if insulin doesn't drop in your blood, then the fat from your fat tissue cannot be released back into the bloodstream. It's a simple mechanism, and this fact you can look up in any anatomy book. It's not a secret. That is how it works. So what happens if the main instigator of high insulin is carbohydrates? Carbohydrates or sugar is the same thing. It all becomes sugar in your body and stimulates your insulin. So if you have a high carbohydrate diet, your insulin can now get to an artificial high level where it does not come down again. And the reason for that is that your body anticipates what you're going to do. It anticipates the diet you're used to. Okay, this is actually, you can just take a side step for a moment. This is how we learn anything. How we learn to drive a car. Your body anticipates, you do something once, and then your nerve system accommodates that, and next time you do that thing, It's going, oh, he needs this, he needs that, and it sets up, it anticipates it. So what actually happens with the diet you have, when you go to eat, your body's pretty much already anticipating what you're going to eat, and it's going to release insulin just thinking about eating. And when you release insulin, your blood sugar drops, and that's when you eat. And if you used to eat carbohydrates, then you eat carbohydrates. Blood sugar goes up, some goes to muscles, liver, rest goes to fat. But if you predominantly have carbohydrates in your diet, your insulin might stay too high for your fat ever to come out of your fat storage. That is basically the mechanism of how we get fat. Okay. There are other things like, you know, brain lesions, you get other hormones out of control, but let's say this is in a normal functioning person. This is the mechanism how we get fat, how we accumulate fat. Is that pretty clear to everybody? Yeah. So carbohydrates is the one that stimulates insulin the most. We basically have three components, what we call macronutrients in our diet: carbohydrates, protein. Protein may stimulate insulin, not very likely, because if you have excess protein, it can get broken down to sugar, but because the process of breaking down insulin itself takes so much energy from the body, it's not that likely, but it's possible. Okay, so too much protein can affect insulin as well. Fat, never. It will never stimulate your insulin. And this I put down only temporary, which means fat can only temporary, if your body works well, make you fat, because fat will make you fat in the form of going into your fat cells. And what I mean by that is when we have a meal, well, we don't just eat just carbohydrates, just protein. It's a mixture, right? There's always something. It might be a high protein meal, a high fat meal, a high carbohydrate, but there's something of everything in a meal. But if you have a high carbohydrate meal and there's fat in there, the fat is going to go in, and then it is, we could say, temporary, going to make you fat. So that's how it can make you fat. But if you eat it all by itself, it will never. Okay? And that again, it's just, that's how the body works. I like to come back to the basics. It's not sort of any claim that I've invented. This is just pure anatomy. And this is sort of the approach I've taken to come to where I am today with this. And the experiment I've done on myself and used this is I don't really do anything unless I can understand it right down to a basic anatomy level. When somebody claims you, well, just eat this and eat this and eat this, I'll always try to boil that down so I can understand it. If it doesn't make sense, I don't do it. Even though I have tried some crazy things in my life. Okay, so how we get fat basically depends on how much we stimulate our insulin. Okay, so don't worry too much about this, but we're all different. I'll get to that in a minute. So if you're what it says here is carbohydrate tolerant, then you can most likely eat carbohydrates without getting fat, because you've got what some would say fast metabolism. You know, you can convert that straight away to energy. So it never even goes to fat storage. So it would, if we boiled that down and looked at your muscle tissue, for instance, it would mean that your muscles are very, very good. They're very responsive to when insulin comes. They suck in the sugar, and you've got energy. That's basically what that means. So sometimes we see these, you know, we look at marathon runners, right? And we say, wow, well, no wonder they're skinny, they run so much. Of course they are. Maybe they run because they're skinny.
Yeah.
Get what I'm saying?
No,
On the other
I don't get that.
What's that?
I don't get that secondary.
Okay, yeah, I'll put that again. So if you're very, very carbohydrate tolerant, which means you can really, when insulin comes into your blood, your muscles have got all these receptors on them that respond to that insulin, which allows the muscle to take in that sugar. And that gives you energy. Okay? So you basically got a natural fast metabolism. Okay, you can convert, in a nutshell, you can, if you're right at that scale, you see these people that have 3% body fat.
Yes.
Okay, let's take the Kenyans. Okay, they probably have natural fast metabolism. They're built this way. It's genetic.
Yes.
So what I'm saying is, you're not skinny. You're not skinny because you're running all the time. You've actually got the energy to run because you got this fast metabolism, and you'd probably be skinny anyway.
Yes.
Whether you ran or not.
Yeah, yeah.
But every time you eat, you get like hyper. So you got to do something.
Yeah.
Okay. At the other end, you're completely intolerant. You just got to look at food, or carbohydrates just to come into your bloodstream, and boom, your muscles can't take in very much. They're very, what do you call, insulin resistant. So they only suck in a little bit, but your blood sugar cannot remain high for very long.
What's your name?
So where's your body going to put that sugar? Into the fat. Into the fat. It's got nowhere else. Once your liver's full, it puts it in to your fat tissue. Okay? So we're just talking about basic mechanisms here.
But how can you tell where you are on that scale? Is it possible?
Well, we sort of all know roughly what we do when we eat. But we'll get to that. So what I'm getting at here is that, you know, we often say, well, look at that very obese person. You know? Man, they're so, no wonder they're fat. They're so lazy. Well, maybe like the marathon runner, maybe they're lazy because they're getting fat. Okay? It's a very big difference. And what I mean by that is that the word that describes that is this phrase, fuel partitioning. So it means that when you have this, and we've all seen the morbidly obese, okay? Is that when they eat, that fuel is so partitioned mainly to fat tissue, no matter how much they eat. So if you think about it this way, like a gauge that whenever you eat, the food you eat, especially carbohydrates, it either goes to energy or it goes to fat. Alright? Just from your genes. Just from having all your lifestyle will get out of that. But from the way you are at that moment. And it first woke me up to this when I saw some research on some morbidly obese people that had back pain. And it's a doctor and a researcher I followed for a while, and he said, well, I was always under the impression that you have these big people, they would have some muscle underneath because they've really been carrying around all this weight. But they had this chronic back pain, so they did CT scans on them. And they found that some of their back muscles were like paper thin. They were basically starving to death. Okay? Because this scale was so far over here that when they ate, hardly anything went to the maintenance of the body. The insulin levels were so out of whack that as soon as they ate, it just went to fat storage and hardly anything to maintain. So this is how you get these big people, they just eat and eat and eat, and they're actually starving to death.
Is that why they continue to eat more? Because
then, and especially if they don't break that cycle, they're going to have to eat more and more and more, because they get more and more and more insulin resistant. So less and less and less and less is going into the organs and muscles. And you can sort of say, well, let's say a person needs, the average person needs about 2,500 calories. Okay, so now this person eats 2,500 calories, but 40% goes to fat storage. Well, now they're just 1,000 calories in deficit. So they have to eat 3.5 just to get that. And then it grows. So all of a sudden this person that needs 2,500 calories a day might be eating 5 just to stay alive, just to maintain bodily function. You see a picture starting to appear here? So what determines this? What's the open door condition we talk about that makes that door open? So your body can control this. Well, number one, well, there's 2 factors basically. First one is your genes. And we can't do much about that. You know, we're stuck with that. So, and just to prove a point, this is certainly not to say that people are cattle, but you know, when we say that, well, people should just, you know, eat less and move more. This is 2 breeds of cattle. This is a Jersey breed, and this is what we call a Limousin breed. My parents breed these. Okay, one's a dairy breed, one's a beef breed. This is one of the most famous bulls in Australia, that my dad bred. It's about 1.3 tons of that picture, and you could basically just feed him and feed him and feed him and feed him, and you'll put on very little fat. As you can see, it's pretty much all muscle. And that is what that breed is famous for. It's called the carcass breed, because they just make meat. And you feed them carbohydrate. What do you feed cattle? You feed them grain, especially what, you know, they eat grass, but to get them in this sort of condition, this is for an exhibition, but he will not put on more fat. He'll just keep building muscle tissue. This is a Jersey bull. It's a dairy breed, so you could feed that and he will never ever look like this. Yeah? It's not like that when, you know, when it's 7 o'clock and Limousin is sitting in front of the TV, you know, chilling out, he's up, you know, running 3 laps at the back paddock. That's not what's happening, isn't it? See what I'm saying? See how genes are, how strong they are? And yet in animals, we don't doubt that. This is just to show you the female version. It's same, because what someone like Jersey is built for, what they're genetically built for is to produce milk. So all their energy, when a farmer has, you know, milk production, they want all that feed they give to the cattle to go into milk. They don't want them to put on meat. But the ones who breed Limousin do. Okay? We have the same in people, don't we? Would you say that this guy ate too much and these guys ate too little, or could it be something genetic? Anybody know who that guy is? Shaquille O'Neal. And would you say that he grew tall because he played basketball and this guy just never played basketball? And that's why there's a difference? Would you say there's a genetic component? So there's a huge genetic component. Huge. But guess what? You have to think of it just as your starting point. That's just where we start. We come back to that scale before. It's just where you start on that scale, that's where you start. I truly believe it is possible to manipulate that. Okay? It's just different for me than it is for you. But it's possible, and it's the same thing. And the main thing is food. We can control that. That is the most potent thing that will control us. So, what you eat I may have those slides the other way around, but anyway. So now I'm going to tell you.
Sorry, one question. I hate to interrupt, but can you go back to the previous slide, please?
Which one?
The carbohydrate continuum.
This one?
This one, yeah. So you're saying some people are more or less tolerant for carbohydrates, to the intake of carbohydrates.
Yes.
But do you differentiate somewhere? Do you distinguish between good carbohydrates and bad carbohydrates? Because I truly believe that there's a huge difference in that.
Okay.
Glycemic index, insulin, that's all sort of related. So I'm just waiting for that. If it comes later on, I'm shut up.
No, let's because everybody probably heard that, you know, and we're really talking about the what you call the glycemic index. We all heard that food is more glycemic than other foods, and that basically means that how quickly will that carbohydrate, so we've got carbohydrates, you know, we've got carbohydrates in fruit, especially in, you know, grain, bread, pasta, potatoes, and you can look this up, just the glycemic index on the net anyway. What that basically means is it's each, there's a number to each food, and what it means is how quickly it raises your blood sugar and how long it stays up there. So you got your carbohydrates, let's say, well let's say we have some oranges here. I sit down and eat the oranges. There's sugar in the oranges and my blood sugar starts to rise. But let's say I juice those oranges and put them in a glass and drink them straight away. You think my blood sugar would go up quicker? Yeah. So it basically depends, because see, if you eat the orange, you're going to get some fiber and you're going to do it slower too. And your blood sugar will rise, but if you squeeze that and you drink it, it's going to rise much quicker. You get a lot quicker hit. And then you have, you know, different foods, you have different tolerances. So that's basically what, you know, good and bad is a term, but I think that's what you're referring to, yes?
Yes, I am. Let's just give you one example, because we're sitting in an Italian restaurant.
Yes.
Everybody is like, you know, if they're on a diet, they claim pasta. They say pasta is the worst thing you can eat in the world. But it's not. It depends. If you cook pasta and it's really soft-boiled, it has a higher glycemic index than if it's still al dente. So you can eat a lot of pasta. I was the slimmest in my life when I ate a lot of carbohydrates, but good carbohydrates.
Yeah.
So,
and see, there's all those variants. It really, but again, it comes, and I'll get to this.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a good point. But see, the individual foods is also individual to the individual. Even though the glycemic index is one thing, because there's more hormones than insulin, right? There's a lot. And you can have so many things going on, and your digestive enzymes and how you digest things. There's so many factors. This is just really a boiled down presentation for you, yeah? But I'm going to give you an idea, because the next part of this is basically what I've been through, and especially lately. So here's my story. This is me when I was in Florida in December 2013, and that's when I had that test that I was just showing you before. I was pretty much at the top of my game running. I'd done ultra marathons. I was training for another marathon. But the interesting here is just what they measured at the university was that, well, I was about 65 kilos, 144 pounds for those of you in pounds, and I was about 12-13% body fat. What I was doing at the time was about over 100 kilometers a week of running, or close to 100 miles. So I couldn't really be much more active. Okay? But by March 2014, I've come to the conclusion that long distance running was not a healthy thing to do, even though this is what I've been doing very seriously for the last 4 or 5 years of my life. So I didn't quit exercising, but I more or less quit that much running. I still run a little bit and do different things, but I really cut down because I did not think it was a healthy thing. Even though I have trained, look, I've done a lot of training. For instance, the last few years I've worked in Europe in the summer, mainly in construction. So I had to be at work at about 7, but I would get up at 4 or sometimes 3:30 and I would run for 2 and 3 hours. Okay, I would do things like drag tyres behind me for 3 hours. I would run stairs 50 times. The whole workout takes me 3 hours. Things like this. So, and I basically, my theory was, well, you know, if it doesn't kill me, it's going to make me stronger. I've run ultra marathons in Mexico, 85 kilometers. You know, but I just thought, well, if you don't die, well, you're going to be stronger. It's not quite that simple. Through my studies, I found out. So it was with a bit of heavy heart I stopped. But when you see the science in front of you, what I believe to be true, how could I keep going? Anyway, that's another story. So cut a long story short, I more or less stopped running in 2000 and March last year. But the thing is, my weight pretty much stayed at 65 kilos. You know, I mainly throughout the rest of the year, I was just walking every morning, doing some yoga, calisthenics, that sort of thing. But very, very little compared to doing almost 100 kilometers a week. But see, the thing again, my weight pretty much remained the same, and my appetite adjusted, but I was still eating. I've always been a good eating lot. But what I started to learn about was this way of fueling your body using your fat stores, and that I've done successfully with running. And so I more or less kept that up, and it is very normal for me just to eat once a day, every 24 hours. So like you don't really get hungry, okay? And what you're doing is when you starve your body of carbohydrates, which is basically what I did, and then obviously started to use that for my running, you then start to force your body to burn the fat stores. Let me get into this a little bit. So, what I started doing in November, December last year, I've read some new research and I started experimenting with carbohydrates in my diet sometimes. Remember, I was 65 kilos, pretty much remained the same. I had this diet of mainly fat and protein, but very few carbohydrates, only say in the form of green vegetables. So I did this experiment November, December, and I ended up at 67 kilos. Not a lot, but I was heavier than I've ever been in my life. And this is actually just the other week. It's the 12th of January, so what, 16, like a bit over 2.5 weeks ago. And at this point I was starting to do more self-testing, so I've done for the last 17 days probably about 10 blood sugar tests a day, and on that day my blood sugar ranged from about 90 to 104. So I thought, well, this would be an interesting experiment to do, and we've got this talk coming up. I can show what happens. You know, I'm just going to lose a bit of body fat. And if you want to do that the quick way, you basically you're going fast. You stop eating. What happens then is, especially, I was at an advantage because I was my metabolism already set up to digest fat. So as soon as it really, there wasn't a lot of sugar stores, and my body loves burning fat, it will start doing that. I just want to distinguish between fasting and starvation. Fasting is when you eat up basically your energy stores, your fat stores. Starvation is when your body starts eating your muscle tissue and your organs. And I didn't just sort of jump into this, I did some research, and there's some quite good people, researchers I follow and trust. Is that, look, a normal healthy person, they fasted for 40 days with no adverse effects.
Only 40?
40 days, yeah. Just water. Well, my fasting wasn't quite, it was water and coffee. I will never give up my coffee, okay? So I had 1 or 2 coffees a day with cream in it, so yes, I was getting maybe 100 calories. So what I was trying to do was basically mobilize all my energy to body fat. From body fat. So this is what happened in 4 days. I dropped 3.2 kilos and it was 7 pounds. And my blood sugar went from average 97 to 71. Now that was 4 days. I hadn't really expected it. What you also lose is when you take carbohydrates out of the diet, you excrete more water. So some of this is fluid. But nevertheless, it was quite dramatic, and I was actually going to go longer at that point. But I felt a bit jittery and stuff, so I thought, oh well, I'll just stop, you know, and I was happy with that. So you basically, what happens is that you're basically using fat for fuel, and you actually enter into a state called ketosis. Anybody heard of ketosis? Okay, so when you're trying to switch, get your body to using fat for fuel, we all do that. But the problem is getting your brain to use fat for fuel. Okay? From here down, except the nervous system, it can pretty much use the fat you eat in your diet. You know, it comes in the, you eat fat, and it gets broken down again into what you call fatty acids. And every tissue can pretty much use that as energy as well as glucose. Except your brain. Your brain can only use glucose or what you call ketones. Hang on a minute. Now ketones are made in your liver. Your liver converts the fat you eat, all your fat stores, into ketones, and then your brain can use them. And this is a stumbling block, because if you cannot produce ketones, you can't sustain mainly having just fat in your diet, because your brain is going to scream out for glucose. All this is getting fed, but this is not. And it doesn't matter how much this is getting fed when this is not, that's it, end of story. So you might have heard something called the ketogenic diet. This is pretty much what you're trying to do when you're on a ketogenic diet. This is roughly the ratio, you know, give or take. 75% from fat, 20% from protein, because as we talked about, you don't want too high protein. It can get converted to sugar, and then very little carbohydrate.
Is it like Atkins?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is pretty much Atkins, you know.
Yeah.
You know, Atkins is almost another story, but this is the guy who really. But it even goes back. Look, this is not new science. This is old. This is more than 100 years old. Okay. And to me, that's the real terrifying part. That's another story, another night. So if you've heard of the ketogenic diet, that's where that comes from. And as I said, what we're trying to do is produce ketones. Now it turns out that ketones, so they're made in the liver, and you might hear anybody ever heard of ketoacidosis? Anybody refer to that? Type 1 diabetics? It's basically when you produce an overabundance of these ketones and they become toxic. But it happens in type 1 diabetics who they can't use glucose, they're not producing insulin, and so the body's not getting the sugar in the blood, so then it kicks in producing ketones, but it goes in such toxic levels, and that's why it's called ketoacidosis. But ketosis is just a natural state where you're predominantly burning fat for fuel, and you're producing ketones, so your brain is at least getting supplemented with ketones. Now it turns out that your brain prefers ketones over glucose. And this is really the part I'm more excited about than the weight loss. Because dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, whatever you want to call it, as far as I can see, is basically a diabetic brain. You know, the glucose will not come across into the brain to fuel the brain because it has become toxic for the brain, just like the other tissues in your body can. So then cells start to malfunction and basically die, yeah? In a nutshell, simplifying things. It turns out that the ketones can fuel the brain very well. So this is used, actually been used in epilepsy again for, I don't know, 100 years since I've heard about it. So you're able to fuel the brain when it will not accept glucose anymore. Now, a few other interesting things happens is that when you fuel your brain cells with ketones rather than glucose, then they produce their own antioxidants. We all heard we got to have antioxidants in our diet through berries and fruit, because when we produce energy, we produce waste product and what we call free radicals. Anybody heard of that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like the waste product, the damage, and these have to be neutralized. But when you're when you use glucose as your fuel, your cells don't produce those. What ketones do, they actually kick on the genes that produce the antioxidants. That's a cool little thing.
How does our body deal with those free radicals if you didn't know about this? I mean, it's got a natural mechanism for that.
I can't really answer that in detail, to be honest. You know, you will get some through diet. This is just what I've found is just a medical fact. That's just how it works. What ketones also do is that the heart, for example, the heart also prefers ketones. This is just what you can measure, that if it's available in the blood, the brain will take the ketones over the glucose and the heart will too. Now, some of the latest I've just heard is that they've actually they did a study with wound healing in elderly people, and this was actually, it's just come on the market in the last year. You can actually get ketones as supplementation now. Not very nice to take as far as I know, but what they did, these elderly people just increased, they took them orally, and they could work out that they could see that wounds were healing quicker. Now what they actually saw was that ketones actually expand the small blood vessels, like the small capillaries that attach onto the muscle or organ, so there's better blood flow. And this would also happen to your brain. There's small blood vessels everywhere. So when you run on ketones, this is happening everywhere, you're getting better blood flow. This could also explain why my running improved as it did. It's going well. So what ketones do, we just talked about all these, they actually give you better blood flow, and that will assist in something like wound healing. You have less oxidative stress, that's what I talk about. And you also, actually, that's what I mean, you actually produce less free radicals. There is less waste to start with in your combustion, and you produce the antioxidants. So there's less thing, but there's less damage in your body. Now, for those who don't want to, in losing weight, you get this sustained energy. And I didn't just stop at those 4 days. I took 3 days break, and then I fasted for 10 days. I just stopped yesterday. And I kid you not, I have been sleeping about 4 hours a night. And I'm not lying. Maybe 5. But
Why?
I couldn't. I developed a pattern. I learned so much in the last 2 weeks. This is the reason I stopped after day 4 when I initially started, because after the first day I slept okay, and then I started like I couldn't sleep, but I was feeling fine through the day. I did my normal work. But that 4th day I was just awake, wide awake, and my blood sugar had just come down, which it naturally does when you. So I broke the fast, but then I got thinking, well, what's happening, and how ketones work, and I read more, and well, maybe this is happening, all the stuff I just talked about. So I start again, and I just got used to sleeping 4 hours. And it's just, and those of you who've met me, like Andy, Vanessa, it's not like I'm not cockingly present, I would say. I sort of got to try and shut up, And would you say that having to drive this traffic, you got to be fairly alert? I've been doing that for 10 days too. If you had to describe it, it feels like being on 5 cups of coffee a day without the shakes. Wow. It is just, look, I was doing it well before, because I pretty much started this diet 1.5 years ago. And I used it for my running. I got down to eating once a day, and I didn't, bonk out when I ran, and I was just feeling, but I've always probably felt reasonably good. But this fast just took it to like the extreme level of what's possible. And it's just like, I thought after the first few days, is this what's going on? But like through the day, I wouldn't even think about taking a nap. And I'm eating nothing. So,
Sorry,
yeah.
Can I ask you, because from one experience, I think there's also a difference between, and you showed that before, the insulin tolerance and what have you. So, or carbohydrate tolerance. Some people are, from what I hear, and I'm not an expert like you are, some people are more built to eat protein, some are more of a carbohydrate type. So, as an example, Ingrid, my wife, she can skip a meal, and it's all good. I skip 1 meal, and I get grumpy as fuck, excuse my friend, because my blood, my sugar, the blood level just goes down. I get shaky. I just don't feel well.
Yeah.
So even in meetings, I have to have a break in order to have a sandwich like every 2 hours or 3 hours, just like to sustain that intake in a sense. So is it gene related? What is it really?
Well, it's a combination, as far as I can see,
yeah.
And I should say that more according to what I've studied, according to,
yeah.
This is all like my conclusions.
I understand.
Look, where you are, say, metabolically, is a combination, obviously, of things, but then it's been the environment, mainly what you've eaten, mainly what you've eaten, because food is information, yeah? Like carbohydrates is information to your body that your blood sugar is going to go up and hormones are going to get stimulated, yeah? So your main, when we talk about environment, is that.
Right.
But it's also what you do. Just hold, I'm going to answer that a little bit later, so it'll fit right in, okay?
Yeah.
This is cancer. So this really represents, the blue is healthy cells, and then you've got cancer cells and healthy cells. So like a tumour. And this is research from one of my favourite researchers, Thomas Seifert. Is basically what he says is cancer is not a genetic disease, it's a metabolic disease. And this whole idea is what I'm so excited about, is that your metabolism, that basically could determine